As a child, I could probably ride before I could walk. I was brought up with ponies.
It was supposed to be a quiet royal afternoon, a gathering steeped in family tradition and innocent celebration. But one careless laugh from Queen Camilla, aimed at young Princess Charlotte's carefully chosen dress, set off a ripple that no one could have predicted. In a world where every royal gesture is dissected, scrutinized and analyzed, what began as a whispered remark behind palace doors quickly escalated into a tense storm. Charlotte may have been young, but she was her mother's daughter and Diana's granddaughter, and when those two legacies collide, even a single comment can leave a mark. What happened next stunned even the most seasoned royal watchers. This is the story of a dress, a laugh, and the moment the future princess revealed the quiet power of grace and resolve. The whisper lingered at the staircase, the late afternoon sun streaming through the towering windows of Balmoral's west wing. The royal family assembled for a private luncheon, a carefully choreographed moment. Off the record, no cameras, just family. Princess Charlotte had chosen her outfit with care, a pale blue, vintage-inspired dress with lace trim and a velvet sash. It was classic, elegant, and unmistakably sentimental, a piece that had belonged to her great-grandmother and borrowed with permission from a royal archive. Rarely touched, it was timeless, but it wasn't the dress itself that drew all eyes. It was the reaction as Charlotte descended the grand staircase, smoothing the pleats with small, deliberate hands. A faint chuckle broke the silence from the far corner. Camilla, standing beside a cluster of senior royals, leaned toward a companion and muttered something under her breath. It was meant to stay private, but whispers move fast in quiet palace halls. "She looks like she stepped out of a period drama," Camilla said, lips curling in amusement. Those nearby stifled laughter, unsure whether to join in or remain neutral. But one person didn't laugh. Prince George heard it, and Charlotte saw it on his face. The sparkle of pride in her brother's eyes suddenly dimmed. That was the moment everything shifted. Charlotte's smile faltered, her steps slowed. Though she completed her descent with poise, the atmosphere had grown colder. William noticed. Kate noticed. This wasn't just a joke, it was a subtle dig, wrapped in polished humour, delivered to a child barely old enough to grasp its full weight. That's the cruel rhythm of palace life. It doesn't wait for understanding. Charlotte didn't cry. She didn't speak. But as the family gathered around the long table set with fine china and gilded silverware, she quietly excused herself. No one stopped her. No one asked why. To outsiders, it could have passed unnoticed, folded seamlessly into the tapestry of royal life. Yet the hush that followed, the awkward glances, the silence stretching between courses, said everything. Camilla continued her conversation, her expression untouched by regret. Perhaps she thought the moment had ended. But upstairs, in a small dressing room overlooking the garden, Princess Charlotte sat on a window bench, clutching the edge of her skirt, staring at the velvet sash between her fingers. Her reflection in the glass didn't show embarrassment, it showed determination. A seed had been planted. The girl in the blue dress was about to respond in a way no one expected. Mock a Windsor, and the moment might pass. Mock Diana's granddaughter. History has a way of answering back. Charlotte didn't collapse. She didn't fling herself onto the bed or throw a tantrum. Instead, she moved quietly, deliberately, away from the main room, down the corridor, to a secluded part of the estate used by younger royals for reflection and play. She slipped into a small drawing room behind heavy velvet curtains, a space lined with antique dolls and porcelain tea sets that had once belonged to Queen Victoria's own children. It was quiet, it was safe, and what she did next surprised everyone. Even the passing palace staff. She sat upright, ankles crossed like her mother had taught her, staring at her dress in the mirror, fingers gliding over the lace trim. She smoothed the edges as if trying to untangle the insult, whispering softly to herself. Her intent was unmistakable. She was anchoring herself, gathering focus. The room, echoing with history and childhood memories, became her sanctuary. Slowly, she rose, walking over to a small shelf holding royal mementos and hand-me-downs. Among them, a photograph of Diana holding a young William, smiling like sunlight. Charlotte stood on tiptoe, lifted the frame gently, and studied her grandmother's face. That photo wasn't supposed to be within reach, but it had been moved recently by Princess Anne, who often said Charlotte reminded her of Diana in ways no one else dared voice. The moment of stillness lasted several silent minutes. Then, quietly, she placed the frame back and left, but this time, she didn't return to the gathering. She walked past her usual suite, past the guest rooms, until she reached her mother's dressing quarters. Kate was seated near a tall mirror, adjusting her earrings, posture tense from the comment Charlotte had overheard. When Charlotte entered, Kate's eyes softened immediately. She didn't ask questions. She didn't press. She simply opened her arms. Charlotte stepped in, and then she did something unexpected. "May I change?" she asked. Kate blinked. "You love that dress," she said gently. Charlotte nodded. "I do, but I want to wear something she would never expect." Kate smiled faintly. Understanding instantly, she realized this wasn't retreat. This was strategy, a quiet decision to rise above, not by shrinking, but by standing even taller. Together, they moved to Charlotte's wardrobe. The girl who had been mocked for lace and velvet was about to re-enter the luncheon, but she wouldn't be the same. The curtain had lifted, and Charlotte had chosen her next act. Inside the dining hall, the air had stiffened. Conversations slowed. Laughter sounded forced. William's eyes darted repeatedly toward the hallway where Charlotte had vanished. Kate returned moments later, composed, graceful, yet with shoulders squared, a subtle signal that something significant was coming. Camilla sat near King Charles, sipping tea, gesturing toward the centerpiece on the table, unaware that the young princess had already begun her quiet revolution. She hadn't noticed Kate standing quietly behind her until the room fell silent again. Camilla turned, still wearing the smile of someone in control, but Kate didn't smile. She leaned in just slightly and said something. No one else heard the words, but everyone saw the queen consort's face tighten. Kate didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She had perfected the art of making a point without theatrics. The power wasn't in what she said aloud, but in the timing, the poise, and the subtle message beneath her calm expression. It was the look of a lion whose cub had just been mocked, a silent warning that such behavior would not be tolerated, even behind the most private palace walls. William joined her moments later. His face was unreadable, but the subtle tension in his jaw spoke volumes. The way he positioned himself beside Kate wasn't protective. It was supportive, a quiet signal. "We are united in this." Camilla tried to regain her footing, offering a dry remark about the challenges of keeping up with fashion these days, but it fell completely flat. No one laughed, not even Charles. The silence spoke louder than any rebuke could. Staff continued to serve the next course, yet the room felt heavier, denser, almost electric. Kate sat across from Camilla, calm but unreadable. William offered Charlotte's empty chair a glance and without fanfare adjusted it slightly. Signalling clearly, her seat was still hers, still protected. No one dared take it. Then the moment shifted. Everything arrived at once. Charlotte returned, but not in the same dress. She walked in wearing a striking emerald green ensemble. Modern, sleek, bold, shimmering slightly as she moved. Nothing like the vintage blue that had sparked mockery. This was deliberate, intentional, and it drew every eye. Camilla blinked, momentarily thrown off. Charlotte's chin lifted, her posture perfect, her movements precise. She sat beside her brother, who whispered something that made her smile. Kate placed her hand gently over Charlotte's, a quiet gesture of presence, strength, and reassurance. Camilla said nothing. Perhaps she knew she had crossed a line, perhaps she didn't. But in that instant, it didn't matter. Charlotte had returned on her own terms, wielding the silent power of a girl who had learned early how to wear dignity like a crown. And Kate had made one thing unmistakably clear. No one mocks her daughter, not even a queen. The silent standoff at the banquet table was palpable. The clinking of silverware against porcelain echoed through the hall, but it did little to mask the tension. Charlotte's return in her emerald green dress sent a subtle, quiet wave of discomfort through the room. No one commented on the wardrobe change, but everyone noticed it wasn't just the colour that stunned them. The transformation was striking. Gone was the lace and velvet of before. In its place, a bold silhouette for a girl who knew exactly what message she wanted to send. Seated now between Prince George and Kate, Charlotte was no longer the soft-spoken child in the vintage gown. She observed calmly, collected. every movement precise. Across the table, Camilla stirred her tea slowly, deliberately, avoiding Charlotte's eyes. The Queen Consort, once the most commanding voice at royal gatherings, was unusually quiet. She offered Charles a brief, forced smile, then returned her gaze to her plate. The shift in power was silent, but undeniable. William noticed. He leaned slightly toward Kate and whispered something only she could hear. Her eyes didn't leave Camilla, but her lips tightened. Kate was not the type to cause a public disruption, but this wasn't public. This was family. And family, particularly in the royal sense, came with its rules, codes, and silent wars. Princess Anne, seated further down the table, observed with hawk-like precision. Protective of younger royals, especially Charlotte, she had felt the sting of hierarchy and sharp words before. Her brief, sharp glance at Camilla said it all. You went too far. The rest of the guests resumed their roles. Conversations flowed again, carefully measured, jokes punctuating the air, wine poured, polite laughter filling the hall like a soundtrack trying to mask the unspoken tension. But the children didn't play along. George stayed close to Charlotte, whispering occasionally to lighten her mood. Louis, unaware of the subtleties, giggled at her reaction to a spoonful of peas. Yet even the youngest seemed to sense something was off. The mood was regal, but undeniably strained. Charlotte never looked directly at Camilla. Not once, and yet the absence of a glance carried more weight than any words could convey. She had made her statement, not with confrontation or tears, but through presence, through unwavering grace. Camilla, accustomed to commanding attention, found herself unexpectedly sidelined in a moment meant for her. The meal concluded with raspberry tarts and clotted cream. No one requested seconds. As the royals rose, chairs scraped softly across the marble. William placed a hand on Charlotte's shoulder. She looked up at him, smiled softly, and walked with her head held high. The standoff was over, but the ripple it caused had only just begun. After the luncheon, William confronted his father. The moment the family dispersed, the air around him thickened. He exchanged a brief, knowing glance with Kate, who gave the smallest nod. Charlotte had handled the incident with grace far beyond her years, but silence did not equal acceptance. William was no longer the boy who had watched his mother suffer under royal indifference. He was a father now, and when it came to his children, especially Charlotte, he would not allow history to repeat itself. He did not wait while the family dispersed for afternoon activities. William followed King Charles into the library, a room lined with centuries of secrets, bound in oak, quiet and solemn. Charles poured himself a glass of brandy, likely hoping to steady himself after what had been a far more stressful gathering than anticipated. He turned as William entered, already aware this would not be a casual conversation. William didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were sharp, low, deliberate. He began with the comment, the laugh about Charlotte's dress. Plainly, he asked if Charles had heard it. Charles paused, fingers tightening around the crystal glass. I did, he admitted. But I didn't think it necessary to... To what? William interrupted. To remind your wife she's mocking a child in her own home. Charles set the glass down without drinking. There was tension in his eyes. Now, not anger, but unease. William stepped forward. His voice still didn't rise, but his presence filled the room. That dress meant something to Charlotte. It was Diana's, and she chose it to honor the legacy. This family tries so hard to claim publicly while disrespecting privately. Charles inhaled slowly. Camilla was making a joke. She didn't mean to hurt her. That wasn't the point. William said firmly, she did, and it wasn't the first time. The king stayed quiet, but the flicker in his expression betrayed the truth. This wasn't an isolated incident. Camilla's history of subtle jabs, controlling conversations with wit, and veiled commentary on those around Diana was known, if rarely addressed publicly. That cut too deep. It wasn't news to him, but acknowledging it meant responsibility, and responsibility meant disruption. William didn't expect an apology. He wasn't asking for permission. He was drawing a line. I won't have my daughter grow up questioning her worth because we're too polite to call out cruelty, he said, and I won't let what happened to Mum happen to Charlotte. Charles looked down, then to the fire, the silence weighing between them like a crown that had never quite fit. Finally, he spoke. I'll speak with her. William nodded once, then turned to leave. As he opened the door, he added one final thought over his shoulder. She's only 8, but she's watching. And so is the world. The door closed softly behind him, but its echo lingered. A confrontation decades in the making had just taken place, not with shouts, but with truth. And the next move belonged to the crown, Camilla's. Past comments resurfaced. By evening, the royal media team was already responding to whispers. What had been a private moment between royals was now feeding curiosity among insiders, amplified by a single leaked quote. "She looks like she stepped out of a period drama," appeared in a discreet column of a London gossip site, credited to a palace source. It wasn't the quote itself that caused the stir. It was the timing, and more importantly, who it was aimed at. The public adored Princess Charlotte. She was seen as confident, bright, and remarkably poised for her age. When someone inside the palace mocked her fashion, the public took it personally. Social media caught fire before dawn. What truly ignited the backlash were resurfaced remarks from Camilla's past. Internet sleuths wasted no time digging through archived interviews, press clippings, and anecdotal reports from palace staff who had served under Charles during his transition to kingship. One story recounted Camilla joking about Diana's wardrobe theatrics, saying she always knew how to make a scene even in a simple sweater. Another revealed a dinner conversation where Camilla reportedly dismissed Kate's early style as too Middleton and not enough monarchy. Each remark had once been buried under layers of palace discretion and media courtesy, but now they bubbled to the surface, revealing a pattern impossible to ignore. Camilla's so-called jokes almost always targeted women closest to Diana, by blood, marriage, or memory. It wasn't just the press who noticed. Even those loyal to Camilla grew uneasy. Several senior aides who had worked long with Charles whispered about this recurring blind spot in an otherwise polished queen. Others were less diplomatic. "She's never been comfortable with Diana's shadow," a former aide confessed anonymously. And unfortunately, she seems to see it in Charlotte. Public opinion shifted almost overnight. Online polls showed a sharp drop in Camilla's favourability. Within 48 hours, hashtags like #ProtectPrincessCharlotte and #QueenOfShadows began trending across royal forums and fan accounts. Side-by-side photos of young Diana and Charlotte went viral, fueling the notion that Camilla's resentment stemmed from uncomfortable familiarity. Images of Charlotte's blue vintage dress spread across the internet, transforming it into a symbol, not just of fashion, but of legacy, remembrance, and defiance. In one particularly powerful post, a royal historian wrote, "What Camilla failed to see was that mocking the dress didn't belittle a child. It awoke the memory of a woman the nation never forgot." The sentiment echoed worldwide, from royal watchers in Canada to commentators in New Zealand. The message was clear. Whatever Camilla's intentions, her words had reopened a wound. The palace issued no official statement, but silence spoke louder than spin. With each passing hour, one fact became undeniable. This wasn't just about Charlotte's dress, it was about Diana's ghost, and the one woman still unable to live with it. Public backlash escalated within days. What began as a whispered insult turned into an international conversation. The royal press office, usually swift at controlling narratives, was overwhelmed. What complicated matters? This wasn't an official scandal. It was deeply personal, emotional, and it involved a child. No formal protocol existed for such a situation, especially when the wound had been delivered with a laugh and disguised as a joke. The public wasn't laughing. Headlines shifted tone. Camilla was no longer merely the queen consort trying to stabilise the crown. She was now the woman accused of mocking Diana's granddaughter. News programmes from Australia to South Africa aired segments titled "The Charlotte Comment" and "Camilla's Tone Problem." Public figures began weighing in. A well-known children's author tweeted, "Every little girl deserves to feel beautiful in her favourite dress, especially when it belonged to her great-grandmother. Charlotte, we see you." The tweet went viral almost instantly. What truly ignited the backlash was a short video clip leaked from inside the palace. Not high quality, just a shaky moment captured from behind a decorative pillar, but it showed Camilla whispering to another royal, followed by a soft chuckle. As Charlotte descended the stairs, the clip caught the subtle freeze in her posture, the pause in her smile, and the way she looked toward the floor. The video exploded across platforms. Millions could see what had only been hinted at before. Comments flooded in. "She's just a child. This is bullying. Plain and simple. Diana's granddaughter deserves better. Protesters even appeared briefly outside Clarence's house, holding signs with Charlotte's name written in elegant calligraphy beneath photos of Diana smiling in her iconic blue outfits. The implication was clear. Diana's legacy was being mocked, and the people hadn't forgotten her. The palace was silent. Camilla cancelled 2 public engagements, citing schedule adjustments, but no further explanation followed. Meanwhile, Kensington Palace released a previously unscheduled photo of Charlotte and Kate in a garden, smiling and holding hands. The timing was not accidental. The image radiated strength, warmth, and quiet unity, becoming a symbol of resilience. The post caption simply read, "Grace always shines." It received over 2 million likes in just 12 hours behind palace walls. The mood was fractured. Courtiers were divided. Some defended Camilla, insisting she was misunderstood and never intended harm, while others whispered privately that this was a moment that required accountability. Others advised a private apology, something direct and personal to Charlotte, but no such meeting occurred. Camilla remained distant, reportedly wounded by the reaction, but public opinion showed no signs of softening. The incident had tapped into something deeper than royal etiquette. It had touched the fault lines of memory, motherhood, and legacy, reverberating far beyond the palace walls, seeping into the public consciousness in ways the family could not control. Charlotte, for her part, returned to public life with quiet dignity. Her next appearance, a school event with her brothers, was calm and joyful, yet observers noted she wore emerald again, the same colour she chose after the incident. A subtle reminder, she hadn't forgotten, and neither had the world. A private letter from Princess Anne would soon arrive to further shape her understanding, reinforcing lessons of strength and personal integrity. In the midst of public chaos and behind the silence of palace walls, one royal figure took a different approach. Princess Anne, known for her discretion and strength, didn't post photos or offer interviews. She didn't issue statements or join meetings. Instead, she did what few expected. She wrote a letter, not to William, not to Kate, but directly to Charlotte, with care that only someone who understood her could manage. It was handwritten in her unmistakable script, folded carefully and delivered privately through trusted hands. Anne had always shared a quiet bond with her great niece. Perhaps it was because Charlotte reminded her of the girl she once was, sharp-eyed, strong-willed, and misunderstood in a family that didn't always reward softness. Anne had watched the events unfold with quiet fury. She had heard Camilla's comment. She had watched Charlotte's face. Most of all, she had seen the pattern. The letter was short but deliberate. Anne began with a memory, her own childhood moment when a senior royal had once mocked the way she rode her pony. She wrote, "I was about your age, and I wore trousers instead of a dress because I liked the way they felt in the saddle. I heard someone laugh behind me and say I looked like a stable boy. I never forgot it." She went on to acknowledge Charlotte's choice of dress, calling it a beautiful nod to a woman they both admired deeply. Then came the heart of the letter. "You don't need their approval to be royal. You were born with something stronger than titles, integrity. When they whisper, you stand taller. When they laugh, you walk straighter. And when they ignore your strength, you carry it quietly until the day they can't." Anne ended with a simple sentence. "I see you keep walking in your grandmother's light." The letter was not shared publicly, but word of it inevitably reached those close to the family. Kate, upon reading it, reportedly wept. William privately thanked Anne for doing what the institution so often failed to, speaking directly, honestly, and with heart. Charlotte kept the letter in her desk drawer, tucked inside a notebook with a blue ribbon. She didn't talk about it often, but weeks later she was overheard quoting part of it during a conversation. "You don't need their approval to be royal," she said quietly as she tied her shoe. The gesture from Anne marked a turning point, not in media coverage, but in the family dynamic. It was a reminder that within the monarchy, there were still protectors. That legacy didn't have to come with cruelty. That strength didn't need to shout. While Camilla remained silent and Charles focused on state matters, Princess Anne's words echoed in the one place that mattered most, Charlotte's heart. And in doing so, she did what her mother once did for her. She stood in the gap, not with power, but with wisdom. And in the end, it changed everything. Charlotte's graceful response and the palace shift were apparent during the annual Remembrance Day ceremony, a solemn event steeped in tradition, dignity, and symbolism. Royals were expected to appear in black, stand in silence, and honour those lost to war. But this year, All eyes were not on the wreaths or the balcony. They were on Princess Charlotte. She stepped out beside Kate, poised as ever, her dark coat falling just above her knees, her gloves neatly buttoned, her hat perfectly angled, but it was the brooch pinned to her chest that silenced whispers, small and delicate. It was shaped like a white rose with a sapphire centre, the same design Diana once wore to a memorial service in 1992. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it was intentional. That single accessory sent a ripple through the press gallery. It wasn't just fashion, it was memory. Charlotte knew it. She walked with quiet confidence, pausing respectfully beside her mother, every step deliberate, carrying the weight of history and the unspoken expectation of grace. She didn't fidget or glance around for approval. She had become, in just a few weeks, the symbol of a deeper conversation unfolding within the monarchy. The moment was quiet, but its impact was loud. It marked the beginning of what palace insiders later referred to as the Charlotte effect. It wasn't rebellion. It was elegance with an edge. Every subtle gesture and measured step broadcast a message that dignity and legacy could coexist, even in the face of mockery. Since the incident with Camilla, Charlotte hadn't spoken publicly, issued statements, or responded to the gossip surrounding her dress. But every appearance afterward carried subtle defiance, cloaked in dignity. She wore green again during a school presentation. She asked to include a photo of Diana during a history project on British women. She insisted on writing her own thank you cards to people who had sent letters of support, signing in her own handwriting with a small crown drawn at the end. None of it was theatrical. It was a child showing the institution how to lead with grace and subtle authority. Behind the scenes, the ripple became a tide. William and Kate held more private meetings with staff. Camilla reportedly kept a lower profile during family engagements, and most notably, Charles quietly requested a full briefing on public reaction, not just media coverage, but sentiment. What he saw unsettled him. The growing public awareness, whispers, and social media reaction had begun influencing palace strategy in ways never anticipated. Camilla's approval ratings dipped dangerously low. Meanwhile, Charlotte's had skyrocketed within the palace. Courtiers began re-evaluating old patterns. The days of cruel jokes disguised as tradition were being questioned. Diana's shadow wasn't fading. It was being carried forward by her granddaughter, and this time, it was not in protest, but in posture, a posture that demanded respect, even from those who hadn't offered it. Charlotte's final act in the chapter came not with a speech, but with a gesture. At the next family photograph, she stood directly beside Camilla. No fear, no avoidance, just presence. Camilla, for the first time in days, looked visibly uncomfortable, but Charlotte smiled. Every subtle detail, from her gaze to her posture, conveyed that her quiet power could not be underestimated. The message was unmistakable. She didn't need a crown to carry the monarchy forward. She only needed her name, her voice, and the legacy of the woman whose dress once made the palace laugh and made the world listen. Princess Charlotte never raised her voice. She never called a press conference. She didn't need to. In the face of mockery, she responded with quiet strength, unshakable poise, and a legacy too powerful to ignore. What began as a whispered insult about a child's dress became a mirror reflecting the fractures within the palace, the ghosts of the past, and the quiet fire of a future queen in the making. Camilla's laugh was meant to belittle. Instead, it elevated Charlotte into the public's heart, not as a victim, but as a symbol of grace rising above cruelty through a dress, a brooch, and a gaze that never wavered. Charlotte showed the world that dignity doesn't age, and legacy doesn't die. Diana's spirit lives on, not just in tribute, but in defiance, carried now by the granddaughter who walks beside her memory. If this story moved you, imagine what else lies behind the palace walls, the power plays, the quiet rebellions, the unspoken truths. They're not over, they're just beginning. Subscribe for more untold royal stories, explosive revelations, and the moments they never wanted you to see, because sometimes it's not the throne that changes history. It's the girl in the dress they laughed at. Like, share, comment, and subscribe for more royal stories you won't hear anywhere else.